Hello VC, welcome to my channel. Really appreciate you stopping in. Tony here. Tony's LPs are us. We're going to do a little segment on the concept record. Everyone knows or probably thinks, I did for a long time until recently, that this is considered and was the first concept album, concept long playing, which it means it has a mood, it has a theme, it has a common thread in the songs and the structure. This is the classic 1955, released in April 1955, in the wee small hours. And you could see a dejected Frank by the lamppost, a typical mist. And this was just a Nelson Riddle, Frank Sinatra miracle, considered the first concept record. Now here's a nice original pressing. These are mono, of course, on Capitol. Here is a other pressing. Covers are the same on Capitol. So until recently, I was saying to everyone, Frank Sinatra had the first concept record. Now this record also came out in two 10-inch records, gatefold, same cover, and it also came out in 4x4 45s that were called EPs. So 4 45s, 4 songs each, basically filled out the album. And of course, with the advent of the LP, the long playing 12-inch, 33 1/3, the two 10-inch and the 4x4, and those little 45 box sets that were out before the long playing record came out, or was basically the norm, those all went to the wayside. So what is the first concept record? Well, I got a suggestion from reading this great book called Pops on Louis Armstrong. It's the definitive book as far as I'm concerned. Read a lot of books on Louis Armstrong, Pops. It's not that he was called Pops, he called everybody Pops. And maybe it was because he didn't remember everybody's name. So he would just say, "Hey, Pops, what's happening, right? You're a cool cat." Great book. I highly recommend it. I picked up a copy at a used bookstore. I had read it. I think this book's like 15, 20 years old now. But I remember reading it. I got a copy at the library. And I just got a copy for myself. So I've been getting into it. And in it, it suggested, and it's got a really good argument, that this was the first concept record. This came out about 7 months prior to the Frank Sinatra record. This record was released in 1954. George Avakian was the producer, and it was his genesis and his forethought to put Louis in this particular situation where he could do an album of one composer, William Christopher Handy, which is known as W.C. Handy, the godfather of the blues. He was a blues man, moved all over the South, ended up in New York City. Was one of the first black artists to have his own publishing company. Just a trailblazer. And his records, you may not think about it, but you know his records because one of the songs on here, Hesitation Blues, it was actually made famous by, for me, when I first heard it, when I was aware of it, was Hot Tuna and also the Grateful Dead. So, these records are just, they span all genres. So basically, this is the first concept record. It's a beautiful 6i Columbia. I just played it, rocked it out. Was hoping I had because I read about it in this book, and I'll read the passage. Great liner notes by the producer, who is George Avakian. If you go on YouTube, you can hear this record. You could also hear the Frank Sinatra record. But if you go on YouTube, there's a really nice compilation of outtakes from this record. There's an outtake expanded CD that came out about 20 years ago. This is the original. This record's 7 years old, and it's basically a strong VG plus. Some tracks are actually near mint. I don't know how it happened, how it survived, but I just cleaned it and played it, and really great. The only thing I don't like is this cover. You probably can't see it, but the cover is kind of out of focus. It's out of focus, not on purpose, I don't believe. like the Bob Dylan record that's out of focus. The double Bob Dylan record, that photo's out of focus. So this is out of focus. It looks in focus here, but when you look at the record, it's actually a black and white out of focus record. But great liner notes on here. You got Louis Armstrong on trumpet, Trummy Young on trombone, Barney Biggert on clarinet, Billy Kyle piano, Arvell Shaw bass, Barrett Dennis Dems on drums, vocals by Louis Armstrong, and the great Velma Middleton. And Velma Middleton was in his band. She's on a bunch of albums I have with Louis Armstrong, and she's great. She's an unbelievable female blues jazz singer that keeps up with Louis, or I should say Louis keeps up with her. But the subtitle of this is The Father of the Blues, and he's also known as the Godfather of the Blues. The Father of the Blues, interpreted by the master of jazz trumpet and jazz singing. So if you go online to listen to this, to see if you want to pick it up, I recommend you pick one up. It's been reissued. But if you go online, you can hear rehearsals, you can hear outtakes. There's even an interview by W.C. Handy and the producer George Avakin. And the liner notes are I believe by George, and they are tremendous. And like I said, Hesitation Blues are on here. Loveless Love is on here, which you will recognize. St. Louis Blues, Yellow Dog Blues, Ann Hager's Blues, Long Gone, which was an old song written by a blues man, W.C. Handy, about runaway slaves. Memphis Blues, Beale Street Blues, because he ended up living by Beale Street. Ole Miss, Chantez les Basses, which is a New Orleans term. Hesitating Blues, which is also Hesitation Blues on here, and Atlanta Blues. So it's all blues, but it's done with that Louis Armstrong style. And in these liner notes, a very poignant beginning where it states, and I'm going to read this real tiny print. You could see that there, and you could even see that this is a strong VG Plus jacket as well. But up on the top floor of the Columbia Records building on Upper Times Square, in a studio converted to an editing room, a handsome old gentleman sat listening to the tapes of this record, tears streaming from his sightless eyes. I never thought I'd hear my blues like this, W.C. Handy said again and again. Truly wonderful, truly wonderful. Nobody could have done it but my baby boy Louis. So just a tribute to at that point where the great W.C. Handy was able to hear his music on one album, interpreted it by the Louis Armstrong Band and Thelma Middleton. So just a great record. First concept record, has a feel about it, has a thread about it. It's sequenced perfectly, really flows. And it's one of those records where you're thinking, man, why couldn't this be a double record? And if you really want to know, it is kind of a double record because there's a CD out, which I don't have, but I'll be looking for it after I do this tape, which is 76 minutes of outtakes and interviews of this record. And some of the outtakes are rehearsals. So you get to hear Louis Armstrong talking, what key is it in? Okay, you cats hit this, I'm ready. And it actually is a better recording. This record, the great drummer on here, his cymbals are kind of weak. They're kind of fleshed into the mix. Bass is pretty good, but the highs are not to my liking, although it's a 70-year-old mono record that was recorded in 1954. So, but the new CDs, which were out, like I said, an extended version of this record, you could actually hear that cymbal. You can actually hear better drums. Drums are kind of buried on this record. So, I'm just going to read the passage, which led me to believe that this was probably the first concept record and not in the wee small hours by Frank Sinatra, the great Frank Sinatra. Okay, here we go. This is on page 309. Here's a nice shot of Louis, or Louis. He's called Louis. He calls himself Louis. I kind of sometimes forget and call him Louis because it's Louis, but it's Louis. He goes by Louis. He used to say that's what I like to be called. Some folks call me Louis. But here he is, Louis Armstrong, recording W.C. Handy in Chicago. This 1954 album, produced by George Avakin, captured the trumpeter at the peak of his middle-aged prowess. He was about 54 years old here. He was born in either 1900 or 1901. I can't remember when I felt this good about making a record, he said afterward. So that's a great shot. And that's right before this passage on page 309, talking about this record. So I'm going to read it so I don't have to paraphrase it. Avakin, by contrast, proposed to lead him into the age of the long-playing record. Not only was Louis Armstrong Plays W.C. Handy a thematically unified, meticulously sequenced, single-composer album, but most of the songs on it ran well past the 3-minute mark, including an album-opening version of St. Louis Blues that played for nearly 9 minutes. Now, this was also a single, and the single was cut down to about 6.5, 7 minutes. So this is 9 minutes, and that's a beautiful, beautiful recording. It was, in short, a concept album, Avant la Lettre, recorded 7 months before Frank Sinatra and Nelson Riddle invented the genre with In the Wee Small Hours. Now, album Avant la Lettre means before anyone else, and it also says that something that's special that's no one else has done. So that's what avant in French, la lettre. I'm probably butchering it, but avante means before. So before Frank Sinatra and Nelson Riddle invented the genre within the wee small hours, Armstrong responded enthusiastically to his producer's musical suggestions, and the brilliance of his playing reflects this excitement. Rehearsal tapes made at the session show that he played a dominant role in structuring and polishing the arrangements, but it was Avakin who gave to Louis Armstrong Plays W.C. Handy its shape and conceptual unity. And it says much about Armstrong that he was not only willing to accept the younger man's tactful guidance, but capable of recognizing and acknowledging the quality of the results. I can't remember when I felt this good about making a record, he told Avakin after the album was edited. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. This was probably the first concept album. It came before everything, Avante. So check it out. Also, if you don't know about this record, check this out. This is a true concept record as well. This thematically is about love lost, torch songs, in the wee small hours of the morning, Moon Indigo by Duke Ellington, Glad to Be Unhappy, I Get Along Very Well Without You, Deep in a Dream, I See Your Face Before Me, Can't We Be Friends When Your Lover Has Gone, What Is This Thing Called Love, Last Night When We Were Young, I'll Be Around, Ill Wind, It Never Entered My Mind, Dancing on the Ceiling, I'll Never Be the Same, This Love of Mine. So the songs are their composers. Got the Duke Ellington track, Rodgers and Hart, Jimmy Van Heusen, Cole Porter, Harold Arden, and Frank Sinatra actually wrote or partly got credit for This Love of Mine. So these two albums, listen to them. Just a little segment I wanted to share because Louis deserves the credit. First concept record, you heard it here first. Keep rocking. Thanks a lot. Let me know what you think. Do you have another record that predates 1954 or one of those two double 10 inches that were later formed into an album that were considered a concept record? Probably not. You could probably fudge it and maybe it's a concept record, but technically these are concept records as far as the theme, the conception, and the way they flow. So this is it. Thanks a lot. Hope you could stop by again, and hope you can subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And thanks to all you guys and gals who have subscribed to Tony's OPs Are Us. We really appreciate it. Ciao.